Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
All right, sorry about that little glitch. Got a rough start starting today. Welcome everybody. My name is Duck and this is Learning Photography with Duck. Tonight we're going to be going over Photoshop. And in particular, what I want to do today is go over just some editing. I'm going to edit a portrait. So I'm going to go through some of the basic things that I might do for a little bit more of a higher end retouching, not necessarily the top tier, but something to make a portrait look a little bit better than, you know, out of camera, and a little bit better than what you might be able to get just by processing in Lightroom. So we're going to go over a few things that are a little bit more advanced, but hopefully it'll give you something to bite into. Okay. So what I normally do is I typically start and end in Lightroom. And the only reason I do this is because I will do a certain amount of editing within Lightroom. The edits that I know that are easier for me to accomplish within Lightroom before sending it out to Photoshop. And then once I'm done with my editing in Photoshop, I'll bring it back into Lightroom in order to be able to export it, whether it's going to my portfolio or for sharing on social media or for sending to a client. So here in, actually let me get, here's Lightroom. All right, and in Lightroom, I have picked this particular image. And we're having issues with our feed today, aren't we? Getting a lot of skipping. I thought I had fixed that. I've picked this image. I took this at a steampunk event back in August at Wickham Park. It's put on by Silk City Steampunk group on Facebook, some of you may be familiar with. And this young lady was one of the actors that was there participating in the event. Obviously, they had a bunch of different costumed people, and they invite photographers to these events in order to kind of like mutually beneficial event. Costume people can get their photos taken. Photographers have an interesting subject to photograph. It all really well works out. This young lady kind of reminds me of a seafaring pirate, an adventurous young girl. I decided, take a couple of shots. And what I want to do is I want to develop this into a little bit more of a formal portrait. Right now, it's a little bit more on the snapshot end of it. And this, what you're looking at here, is straight out of camera with no editing done whatsoever. So the first thing I want to do, or I should say, the first thing that I typically do with any image in Photoshop is what I call normalizing the image, normalizing it. And this means, on the surface, it means fixing any obvious flaws, any obvious mistakes, anything that really, really stands out as being wrong with the image. This could be fixing horizons if your camera was a little bit off at an angle. This may include recropping an image, color balancing, or color toning if you have a particular taste for an image. Usually I will not quite color tone, but as I'm developing an image, I may get the inclination to either warm it up or cool it off depending on the type of image. So I might do that early on in the development and then build up from there. I'll also correct for any exposure issues. All right, so in this case, you know, we can tell that right on her forehead, she has a pretty, you know, bright spot. It's a little hot there. So I might want to, you know, tone that down. But overall, I'm fairly pleased with this image. All right. I do know that I want to make it into a portrait. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to crop it. And rather than do that whole amount of work all over again, I'll just show you what I did. This is the cropped version and some of the edits that I did. I'll wait for this to refresh. I don't know why it's lagging so much, folks. It seems to be worse than last week. So this is the recrop version. As you can see, I got rid of, you know, all that excess greenery on the side. And what I've done is I've applied a preset that I typically do to all my images. If you've been with me for a while, you know that I tend to add a little bit more contrast and a little bit more saturation to all my images, just because that's what appeals to me. So at this stage of the development would be that salt and pepper to taste. All right, it's still part of the normalizing aspect of the image. But in this case, I'm just adding a little bit of, actually you can see it right here. I brought my highlights down a little bit and I punched my shadows up. So what this is doing is creating a little bit more contrast closer to the midtones, not quite at the ends. And I've increased my texture and clarity quite a bit. All right, I like that extra punch. All right.
Doc, I have a question.
Sure.
What's the difference between what you do here in Lightroom versus Photoshop?
Ease, I would say. So everything that you see here can very easily be done in Photoshop, but within my workflow, I tend to start within Lightroom simply because I utilize Lightroom for I would say about 90% of my editing. That extra 10%, you know, I'll use within Photoshop, but within my workflow, I still start everything in Lightroom. So yes, you can do all of this within Photoshop without even starting Lightroom up. You would basically go to the Adobe Camera Raw and apply similar settings there to normalize your image. So you would open up Adobe Camera Raw, and this is where you would correct for, you know, color temperature, exposure. Make sure you have your horizon straight. If you need to, you know, do any cropping, you could even do it there. Although there's just a little side note in regards to cropping, there's really two schools of thoughts in regards to that. One school is to crop to what you want your composition to look like at the beginning. That way you don't have to do any extra editing on the parts that it'll eventually get cropped out. But then some people say, well, I don't know exactly how it's going to go, so I'll crop at the end. And then that way, if I edit something that, you know, if I crop early and I don't edit something and I decide to change my crop, well, then now I have to go back and fix that part. So if I crop after, I don't have to worry about fixing anything. So there's two schools of thoughts. But anyhow, the other reason I'll start in Lightroom is because I find it easier to work with Lightroom. Me myself personally, I find starting the editing process easier for me in Lightroom because I'm a lot more familiar with Lightroom than I am with Photoshop. So I know how far I can push an image within Lightroom before I have to take it into Photoshop.
So then what's the 10% that for, or is it?
So the 10% would be anything where I have to do anything to do with layers, anything to do with higher end retouching that Lightroom simply can't handle.
Good, thank you.
Okay. And actually, you'll see. I'll point out what I mean by that with this particular image. All right, because you know what I've done is I've normalized my image. I've cropped it to a composition that I am happy with. I'm going to keep, and I really don't do much beyond this. Now I can go in. And using the spot removal tool, I can, you know, clean up her skin a little bit. And I could also do a local adjustment brush and smooth out her skin. But the results aren't as clean as if I did those processes in Photoshop. The other thing is the way Lightroom is set up, the way it operates, it's a little bit more, resource heavy if you do those kind of things within Lightroom rather than Photoshop. So if I know I have a lot of like spot removal and skin softening to do, I'll let Photoshop handle that heavy duty load rather than Lightroom. All right. So here I'm looking at her skin, and even though she's young, you know, she's got some breakout on her forehead, a little bit on her cheek. There's some spots on her glasses here and here, and there's also a reflection of my light in her glasses that I want to get rid of. This part alone is very difficult to do within Lightroom. So if I were to just process this image within Lightroom, I'd probably do a little bit of dodging and burning and trying to correct for it in Lightroom, but I know I wouldn't be able to completely remove it in Lightroom. So there would be, in this case, there would be some sacrifices if I were just to remain within Lightroom. So that's another example. All right, so once I'm happy with the general look, just prior to exporting, I'll go ahead and export the image to Photoshop. Now, this is the final result. All right. Actually, let me go back to Lightroom because I've already imported the image. So this is what it looks like. Come on. All right, so this is the give the screen a second to catch up here. This is the final results with all the edits. All right, so what I want to do is I want to walk you through how I did this. Okay, and actually, if we do a side-by-side comparison, that's the side-by-side comparison. So you can see, you know, the overall tonality of the skin's a little bit smoother. The eyes have been brightened. The lips have been brightened a little bit. All right. So I did quite a bit of work to the face. All right. So what I want to do is I'm going to just go ahead and turn off these layers and just walk through all the steps that I did to process this image. All right, so once imported from Lightroom, I don't have to worry about Adobe Camera Raw because Lightroom is literally Adobe Camera Raw. So when I go from Lightroom straight into Photoshop, it applies all the edits that I did within Lightroom automatically applied in Photoshop. So what I'm looking at here in Photoshop are all the edits that I did in Lightroom. All right, so the first thing that I want to do is smooth out her skin. All right. Oh, actually, give me 1 second. Let me do one thing first. Wrong button. Okay. I'm going to export that one again. That's this one here. The first thing that I do is I'm going to look at the skin and remove any blemishes. Now, there's a couple schools of thought. For this, I usually use the healing brush or the content aware healing brush. And there's two schools of thoughts with this. One, to do it non-destructively, what you will do is create a new layer down at the bottom. Just create a new layer. Let's see, where's my, right here. Okay. Once you have a new layer, select your spot healing tool. All right. Make sure it's at content aware. And also make sure you have sample all layers. All right, because we're working with a blank layer. So if you don't have sample all layers, your brush is not going to select anything. Make your brush large enough to work on the spots, and then just highlight all the little spots, the blemishes on the skin that you want to get rid of. And it's as simple as that. Now, all I got to do is if I make a mistake, I can either, start fresh, okay, or delete everything that I do, or if I need to, get an eraser and erase back. So some people prefer this if they're a little bit unsure of, working with this particular tool. Me personally, I am very comfortable with this tool, and I will usually, not even usually, most of the time, I would say 99.9% of the time, I will work directly on the image, on the background image. All right, because I'm very familiar with the tool, and this allows me to kind of just work fairly fast. And if I accidentally remove something that I didn't want, it is literally a Control-Z key away from bringing that back. All right, now I am using a Wacom tablet, so it makes flying through this very easy. All I got to do is just dab on all the little spots that I want gone, and the magic of the tool just zaps it away. All right, so here are some spots on her glasses. I'll make my brush size the appropriate size, and I just dab on all these little spots, and all those imperfections, all those dust spots are gone. Now, typically when you're doing any kind of spot removal, what you want to do is make sure that you are removing the blemishes. The rule of thumb is that if the blemish is a temporary blemish, go ahead and remove it. All right, now I'm also removing a few little freckles, but these would be things that would be hidden if she were to apply makeup anyway. So certain little spots I will go ahead. She does have a little mole right here next to her lip. I'm going to keep that simply because that's part of who she is. All right, that's not a temporary blemish, so I'll keep it. And it really doesn't bother me. If it bothers you, just zap it away. I also look for strands of hair that may be falling across the face in a very unusual way. All right, and there's one here that kind of crosses her eyebrow, and there's a couple here onto her cheek. All right, so I'll make sure that those get removed. And it's as simple as that. All right, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but you'll just go over and clear up any imperfections in the skin. All right. The other thing I might do is I'll work on removing this section of the reflection of light of my light in her glasses. And sometimes the spot healing tool can fix it. Sometimes it does a really bad job. In this case, it looks like it's doing a fairly decent job. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay. And just like that, she has perfect skin. All right. Once the skin has been cleaned up, the next thing I want to do is I want to smooth out her skin. All right. In this case, you know, the light from the sun is kind of casting a cross light, so it's really accentuating her skin pores. So I want to smooth those out a little bit. And one of the best ways to do it is I have an action that I created that's specifically for smoothing skin. And it's a fairly simple action, and I'll show you how it goes. I'll walk through it. You're gonna create a copy. All right, so basically you're duplicating the layer, and then you're going to invert the layer with Control I. Control I inverts. Basically, it just reverses all the colors in the image. And we're going to change the blend mode to vivid light. Vivid light. And what you're going to see is a gray image. And the reason being is that you have the positive color and the negative color over each other, and they're canceling each other out into a 50% gray. All right, so it's going to look pretty rough while you're developing this preset. All right, but trust me, it all works out in the end. On this layer, the inverted layer, now you have it to vivid light. You're going to go up to the top, filter. All right, filter, and you're going to do other, high pass. Okay, filter, other, oh, wrong one. Filter, other, high pass. Okay. And now, once you apply the high pass, you're going to see that your image comes back. But it comes back a bit blurry. And that's actually what we're looking for. All right. So disregard the fact that, you know, it's a blurry image. What we want to do is look at the skin tone areas. All right. And we want to create a radius. We want to bring our radius to the point where we lose a lot of the texture. All right. So what we're doing is we're kind of using the blur to minimize that texture. All right. And there is no one set value. It's going to obviously depend on the size of your original image. In this case, I have a fairly large image. So I find that somewhere around 8 to 10 works pretty well. So I'm going to go with 10 here. I'm going to go OK. All right. And excuse me. And now we're getting into the magic. We're gonna really rough. Excuse me. I knew my voice was gonna go. We're gonna oh boy, wow. We're going to roughen it up even more. We're going to go filter, blur, Gauss, excuse me. Wow. I apologize, folks. Filter, blur, Gaussian blur. All right. And here is where we're going to start seeing some of our texture in the skin return. I know it sounds counterproductive, all right? But we want to move the slider until we start seeing some texture return back into the skin, all right? But we don't want it to the point where we see every single bit of, every single pore. All right. We do want to retain texture, because obviously we don't want to make her skin look plastic or, so smooth that, we've gotten rid of all the pores. But we also don't want the pores to be overly highlighted. Okay. So 6 looks about right. Okay. All right. Then we're going to add a mask. All right, and we're going to invert our mask. And by inverting it, it hides everything that we just did. Everything that we just did gets hidden. Because what we want to do now is paint in the smoothened texture. All right, so I'm going to zoom into her face here a little bit. Let me move this out of the way. I'm going to paint on the mask. I'm going to select a brush. I have a soft brush. All right, I'm going to hit the letter D to reset my palette to black and white. So we want this black and white. And we can switch back and forth between the black and white with the letter X. X switches our foreground and background color. Okay. So we have our mask. Now, because it's black, it's revealing everything. All right. Below it. So I'm going to switch over to white, and I am now going to paint in all the areas. All right. And I don't know how easy it is for you guys to see it, but it just smoothens out all the texture. All right. Now, I did not apply an extreme smooth. All right. When you do this kind of effect, you can adjust it just by controlling the amount of blur on the two stages, on the high pass and on the Gaussian blur. All right. But what it does is it evens out all the skin without destroying the texture of the skin. Okay. Let me see. Work it right here. Now, what I want to do is avoid any of the edges. All right. I don't want to go where the glasses are, the frame of the glasses. I just want the open areas of skin. All right, I'm going to avoid the eyes. I'm going to avoid hair. Okay. If there are any little, stray strands, that's all right. It's really not going to affect it that much unless you have, more extreme softening. All right, and that looks pretty good. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to get rid of this layer because I've already done it, and that's what it looks like. All right, so if I turn it off, turn it back on, you can see how it just evens out the skin tone, makes it a little bit more flawless. So that's without the smoothening. And this is with the smoothening. All right. Hopefully that comes across on the video. Yes? Okay. All right. As I was working on her skin tone, I noticed that, she's got this very vibrant color in her hair. But her eyebrows are fairly light. So I decided I was going to do a little bit of dodge and burn onto the eyebrow area in order to give it a little bit more definition and make it pop out a little bit more. And this is the end results. Not too heavy. Obviously, you don't want to make it look like it's, really painted in, but kind of keep it a little bit more natural, right? Now, the way I do my dodge and burn is fairly simple. I create a new layer, and I change the layer style to overlay. All right. And then with a brush, I will paint in either black or white. All right. So I'm still going to be using my black and white. All right. So I'm going to select a brush. I'm going to reset. I'm going to reset my swashes to black and white. All right. So reset this to black and white. The letter D resets it. Okay. And I want to make sure that my opacity on my brush is really, really low. I usually go 5%. All right. Now, the shortcut to your opacities is with your number keys. The number 1 gives you 10%. The number 2 gives you 20%. 3, 30, 4, 40, and so on. If you want percentages in between, like for example, I want 5%, I will do 0.5, and it gives me 5%. So I don't have to worry about, you know, dropping it down using the slider or typing it in. All right, I'll just go ahead and use my keyboard. Now, the reason I want such a low percentage is because I want to build up my tones. All right. So it takes me multiple passes, all right, in order to start building up a shadowed tone. All right. You can see here, I have to do a lot of passes in order to get some kind of noticeable shadow. This allows me to slowly build it up without overdoing it. It's very easy to overdo your dodge and burn. All right. So what I'm going to do is just very lightly, here, let me turn off this. Using a soft brush, I'm going to just brush over and very lightly build up a little bit of tonality. And if I want, I can make it really small and get into those little areas that are the lightest parts of her eyebrow and build up tone there. So I can control where I apply my dodging and burning. All right, in this case, we're burning because I'm using black to burn shadow. All right, so if we turn it off, turn it on, turn it off. All right, now I suggest working in areas. All right, so even though this is a dodge and burn layer and I can literally dodge and burn all over the image, I want to compartmentalize just in case I need to make adjustments for a specific area. So in this case, I'm restricting this to just the eyebrows because now I notice that I've gone a little bit too far. That's all right because I can take my opacity and I can move my opacity slider until I feel that it's right for her look. So I can bring the opacity down and, you know, and play around with that and say, okay, that looks a little bit more natural. All right, so if I turn it on, that's before, and that's after. Before and after. So you can see it's just a small, very subtle shading, and it just gives her eyebrows a little bit more definition. Okay? Now, again, I have a preset, and we've already gone over presets. So if you haven't been with me long enough, I know we got a couple members here. You can go back to my previous videos on YouTube, and there's one of the videos I go over how to make presets. All right, but I have a preset right here for creating a dodge and burn layer. And all it is, make a blank layer, change it to overlay, reset my color swatches, and pull up a brush. Okay? All right. The next thing is, while I was working on her eyebrows, I took a notice of her eyes. She has these gorgeous eyes that I feel need to be punched up a little bit. We need to enhance them, add a little bit of vibrancy. And for this, one of the excuse me, one of the easiest ways to do it is with a curves adjustment. Curves adjustment. All right, so I'll show you what it looks like. This is before and this is after. Before, it's a very subtle, I don't know if you guys can see the subtlety of that enhancement, but I'll walk you through it. In your adjustments panel, you're going to create a new curves adjustment, okay? And when the curves adjustment gets brought in, it's going to automatically apply a mask, all right? What we're going to do is invert the mask, all right? Control I inverts it. I'm going then select my brush, and I'm going to size my brush to, let me just size up the eyes here. I'm going to size my brush so that it fits within the area of color, the iris of her eyes. All right. I'm not going to go overly large. And again, I'm still using my soft round brush, and I'm still at 5% from previously, which is fine. Okay. I have my mask here. It's black. So I want my foreground color to be white, and I'm going to go ahead and paint on that mask. All right, and it's not going to do anything right now because I have not done anything with that curves adjustment. All right, so I click on my curves adjustment, bring this up, and if I grab it in the center and just pull up, what it's going to do is it's going to now start brightening her eyes. Okay. And now I go back to my mask, and if I want it a little bit brighter, I can just paint a little bit more. Now, a lot of people will say, well, why don't you just paint 100% white and then control the intensity with the curve? It says, yeah, but if I want a more natural look, I want to be able to control the amount of brightening in different parts of the eye. So for example, if you were to look at the side of an eye, you'll notice that the pupil is not rounded outward. It's actually flat with almost a little bit of a depression. So any light that hits the eye, is the upper part of the iris is usually going to receive some kind of shadow, and the light, if it's coming from above, will hit the lower part. So I want a little bit more definition, highlight definition, on the opposite side of my light. All right, so let me just create a new layer. So we have light coming in this direction. So that means if this is my eye, oh, let me back that up one. Come on. This is the eye. I want the highlight in this section here. right in here. I want the highlight here. All right. So I'm going to paint white opposite of where my light is coming from. All right. And as it comes around the curve of the iris, I'm not going to paint as much in the shadow areas. Okay. So hopefully that makes sense. So what that does is it just gives it a little bit of punch. Now there is a reflection of my light, so I can go ahead and I can even brighten that up to create more of a catch light. All right, so I'm enhancing the catch light, enhancing the iris. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm also going to enhance the color a little bit here. I want that color to pop out a little bit more. And she's got blue eyes. So I'm going to go to my blue channel. All right. So right here in the drop down, I'm going to go blue. And I'm going to take that. Oh, come on. Let me make this a little larger. I'm going to take it from the center and I'm just going to bring it up just a tiny little bit. All right. You don't want to go too much. Otherwise, you know, it's going to look fake, like she's wearing some kind of crazy contacts. All right. You just need a little bit to punch up that blue. And voila. She has blue eyes. All right. So this is before. This is after, okay? And again, if you feel that it's too much, you can take the opacity and bring it down, all right? Because I think I went a little bit too much there, okay? All right. So that's the eyes. Now, it's starting to look more like a proper portrait. And what I want to do is, you know, I want to even out the color on her lips a little bit. So I've done the eyebrows, I've done the eyes. Let's go to the lips, all right? And we're going to zoom in here, okay? And again, this one is a fairly simple fix as well. This is before. This is after. Before, after. It's a very subtle effect, all right? And all I did for this is I created a new layer. I changed the blending mode to soft light, all right? Because what I want to do is I want to enhance the color a little bit. With my brush, where's my brush? My brush. If I press and hold the Alt key, Option key for, I believe it's the Option key for you Mac users, it turns into a little target reticle. This allows me to pick a color off the screen. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sample a color right from her lips. Okay. And once it's sampled, it puts it right into my color picker right here. It's my foreground color. I'm going to double click on that, or actually I single click, right? And what I want to do is I'm just going to bring up the saturation. So S for saturation, all right? H is for hue. H is for hue, S is for saturation, and B is for brightness. We want to select saturation, and I'm going to bring the saturation up. Okay. And then with my brush, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to go to 100%, right? And to get 100% up here, the number 0 brings you to 100%. So 9 is 90, 0 is 100. And I'm going to go ahead and paint on her lips. And you can see now what it's doing is it's really, really enhancing the color of her lips. And with this technique, this is a great way of applying makeup to somebody who doesn't have makeup. All right, you want really bright red lips. This is a great way of doing it because you can pick any color you want and just add it in. In this case, we want to keep it fairly neutral, complementary to her. So that's why I decided to just select a color that is, natural to her lips. And I'm using that to enhance it. All right. And again, if you feel that it's a little bit too much, just back it off with a little bit of the opacity until it looks good. All right. Now, right now, I'm working very tight. I got her zoomed in. What I normally like to do is zoom back out. So Control 0 zooms back out. And at this point, I'll work with the opacity because seeing it in full in respects to the overall look lets me know, if I've gone too far. So right about 50% looks fairly decent. Okay. All right, so that's the lips. Okay. And one thing I should be doing, which I haven't, is putting labels on these. It's a good habit to get into. So for example, this is my skin softening. All right, so I can call this skin. This is my get out of here. This is my eyebrows. Turn it off, turn it on. All right. Because I used an action, it automatically labeled it dodge and burn, but I can go ahead and rename it eyebrows. Okay. This is a prime example of why you want to label. All right. The preview is showing me a big black square with possibly something in white, but in the whole workflow, if you have a lot of different layers with a lot of different masks, it's very easy to lose track of what mask is what. All right, and there's very little information. This could, I know this is the eyes right now because it's still early, but this could be very easily, a set of lips, a set of earrings, some other little feature that you tend to lose track. So it's good to keep track of what you're doing. So I'm going to call this eyes. All right. This one that we just did is lips. All right. Yes, sure.
This mode, before the close-up, her mouth may almost appear to be open. And when you bring her up, it doesn't appear to be open. There's quite a difference. I mean, it seems almost slightly open. Maybe it's my screen.
Yeah, I'm not really seeing it, but
I
can see it a little bit, but I think it's the distortion of the video software more than if we were looking at the final thing. I think we would not see that. That's just kind of the way I'm looking at it from my end.
You're probably right. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and all right, so actually, but you know what? It does bring up a good point. Because depending on the color, all right, because it is tinting everything. If you feel that it's tinting parts of the image that you don't want tinted, So like for in this particular instance, the deepest part of the lips where the upper and lower lips meet creates a very deep shadow. All right. If you find that it softened that shadow too much, and I think that might be what's making it look like her lips are parted a little bit, we can bring some of that shadow back. And the way we do that is on the blank part of the layer. All right, so here's our lips layer. On the blank part, if you double click, it's going to bring up this dialog box, let me move it out of the way, layer style. All right, and actually this is something you guys should really learn to get a handle on, because it has a lot of applications. And that is the blend if. So the way blend if works is you have this layer, which is our lips layer, our lips color, right? And then you have the underlying layer, which is everything below it. Okay? And what we're doing is we're controlling how much of one layer gets hidden or comes through the other layer, depending on how we manipulate these sliders. So for example, we have everything on the right hand side is white, everything on the left hand side is black. So this is our range and luminosity. We're not dealing with color here. We're dealing with luminosity. Okay? And if we move the slider for the top, it's going to say anything with this luminosity where the slider is or darker is going to get hidden. All right. Or if we move the white slider, anything with luminosity where the white slider is and lighter is going to get hidden. Okay. Now in this case, it's not going to make a big effect here because we're dealing with a solid color that has a single luminosity. All right. So if I move my slider too far, you're going to see that the color disappears. All right. Because there's no value range to the color that I applied. It's just one single value which has one single luminosity. So that's just going to turn it on and off. So that's not going to help in this case. What we want is the underlying shadow to come through. So for that, we're going to go to our underlying layer, all right, and we're going to move our black point, our shadow, and we're going to say everything that is at this darkness and darker, wherever we put our slider, all right, it's going to come through, all right? So you can see how, well, hopefully you guys can see how it just slowly makes that red disappear the more I bring it over. It's because it's saying anything from this point, all right, so here we have it at 89. Anything from a brightness value of 89 and darker, going to 0, 0 brightness is black. Anything from 89 to 0 is going to come through that color layer. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to bring this till we start just seeing that shadow between the lips come through. All right, and I'm going to stop right there. And then if I press and hold the Alt key, it allows me to split these points, and the split is the fuzziness or the transition, how soft the transition is. All right, so what I'm going to do is instead of making a hard transition, that's if the 2 points were together, I'm just going to make a soft transition just by splitting these 2 points apart a little bit. Okay, and then once we say okay, we're good. And now, hopefully, it doesn't look like. Let me zoom out. Hopefully, it doesn't look like the lips are separated. Okay. Does it look like her lips are closed now? Who asked that question earlier? Brian, right?
My point of view, no. But again, it's how I'm seeing it. I could almost feel like I'm seeing teeth coming through there.
Huh, wow. That's strange because that definitely doesn't appear to be in my case. But like Brian, we got two Brians. The other Brian said is that it just could be artifacting from the video. Yeah. Okay. But anyhow.
I'm concerned that from a certain perspective, it almost looks like some buck teeth, but that's far away and fuzzy, and I think it's like, when you bring it up closer, it disappears, but when you're looking at it at the farther away, but it's definitely
I see. Okay.
Video.
Okay.
So blame Google or whoever this video guy is.
All right,
Are we
cool.
zooming?
We're zooming.
Yeah,
yes.
Put it on Zoom.
All right. Okay, so everybody with me so far? Kind of, sort of? The takeaway, I know technically there's a lot to consume here, but the overall takeaway that I want you guys to walk away from here is more the process of what to do with a portrait, not necessarily how to do it, but what to do. All right, how to do it can easily be looked up. You can just rewatch this video. You can find other videos that explain it, each step a little bit better. All right, but it's the process. Okay. All right. Next thing I want to do is I want to create a little bit more drama. Right now, the light is a little flat, simply because this was taken with a fairly overcast day, and my light was kind of haphazardly set up for a different scene that I took, and I didn't reset it for this particular shot. This was a grab shot. This was like, hey, wait a minute, do me a favor, let me take a picture. So I really wasn't concentrating too much on my light and where it was. So the overall tone is a little flat. So what I want to do is I want to sculpt her face with a little bit of dodging and burning, all right? Or in this particular case, with a little bit of burning, okay? And just like we did earlier with the eyebrows, we're going to use the same exact technique, all right? We're going to create a new layer, apply an overlay, make it make it an overlay layer, and using a brush with 5% opacity, I'm going to paint black in. All right, so this is what it looks like after my dodging and burning. This is what it looks like before. After, before. All right, so you can see that it really, really shapes the face a lot. It reintroduces shadows to give her face a little bit more form. All right. So, like I said, I have an action that does that for me right here. Dodge and burn. All right. But I'll do it manually. We start with a new blank layer. Okay. Change the overlay. Change the blend mode to overlay. Come over here, select my brush tool. All right. I have nice soft brush, and my opacity is going to be 5%. So 0.5 on the keyboard, 5%. Okay. And I'm going to make my brush fairly large. Right? And I'm literally just going to do a half moon. Oops. I think you guys caught that. What did I fail to do? I failed to reset my brushes, or my color. So letter D to reset it. Black is my foreground color because I want to add shadow. And I'm just going to paint right along here. All right. And at this point, when you're dodging and burning, you're going to paint to taste. All right. And I want to add a little bit of shadow underneath her chin. All right. Make her face come out a little bit. I'm going to knock down this highlight on the top of her hair. And I'm also going to knock down the brightness of the blouse. Right now it's really competing. So I'm going to knock that down. All right. And because I'm working with 5% black, it takes me a couple of passes to build up my tones. All right. Build it up. Nice soft brush so we don't have any heavy edges. And I'm going to knock down the tonality of this hand and the silver part of this, the sword blade, just a little bit. All right. Because I don't want those parts of the image to be brighter than her face, if I can help it. All right. There we go. All right, and maybe just enhance the little shadow underneath her lip. I'm going to sculpt her nose, a little bit underneath the nose, a little bit in the eye socket right there. Okay. And that's pretty much it. So this is after, this is before, after, before. And of course, again, if you say, oh my God, I went a little bit too far, you could always control it with the opacity. All right. About 80% looks pretty good. Any questions on how to do a quick dodge and burn? It really is that simple, guys, you know. And as you can see, it really, really does enhance the image a lot. It gives the face a lot more definition, which was pretty much lacking because of the original light. All right. Next thing we're going to do is, I don't even know what this does, what this is. Oh, I mentioned earlier that the forehead was a little bit hot. All right. And I also want to knock down the brightness of the blouse and the sleeve. Okay. So for that, I'm just going to use a very simple curves adjustment. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take the, let me just reset this. I'm going to bring my white point, which is all the way up here. I'm going to bring my white point down. Okay. Not too far because I don't want to make my whites look muted. Okay. But I want to knock some of that shine down. All right. And I also don't want to, you notice that this curve, all right, gives me a logarithmic scale. So while we knocked a lot of the highlights down, we also knocked down our shadows, but not as much. Okay. So if I want to bring my shadows back up, I'm just going to create a point and bring my shadows back up. Okay. And that opens up my shadows. I don't want to lose my shadows here. Okay. And it's that simple. All right. So after, before, after, before. Actually, I think I brought it down too far. Let me bring this up a little bit more. There we go. That looks better. Okay. And all it does is it knocks down that very bright look on her forehead and face, and it knocked down the shirt. Okay. The final thing I noticed on this particular image is we have a bit of a really weird color cast right here. All right. On her face, we have these kind of blotches of yellow in her face. So what I like to do is even out the color of her skin tone. All right. Now, the previous step, we evened out the texture of the skin. Now I want to even out the color on her skin. And this one's going to get a little tricky, so hopefully you guys can follow along, all right, because it requires some manipulation, okay? The first thing we need to do is create some sample colors. Sample colors. And the way we do this, let me just delete that layer. We're going to create a temporary layer, a blank layer, and I'm going to put it on top of everything, okay? And I'm going to take my brush. I'm going to give it, a fairly hard edge. And we're going to look at her skin tone, and we need to pick 3 colors that represent the brightest part of her face, the mid-tone of her face, and the shadow part of her face or her skin tone. All right. And just like previously, we're going to use the Alt or Option key to turn it into our color picker. Okay. And so I'm going to look for a highlight area. So the brightest area is typically along the cheeks, or maybe a highlight spot on the forehead. All right. Sometimes there may be a bright spot on the nose or on the chin. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a sample. All right. And I'm just going to sample the brightest part, and it's going to place it as my foreground color. Okay. And on my blank layer that I just made, I'm just going to, let's bring it up to 100%. I'm just going to paint that color. That's going to be my reference. This is a temporary layer. I'm using this for reference. I'm going to go back to my selection, and I'm going to pick my shadow area. All right. And it's typically along the jawline. All right. Now, I don't want to go completely too dark, because then it starts getting to be, we start losing our saturation as it goes into black. All right. I still want some color to come through. All right. So I'm going to pick a dark color, but not completely into black. Okay? And I'm just going to make my sample there. Now we need to repeat it one third time, and this time I'm going to pick a middle grayish mid-tone color. I shouldn't say middle gray, a mid-tone color. All right, so that looks about right. All right, and now I have my three colors. I have my highlight, I have my mid-tone, and I have my shadow. And we're going to apply this to a gradient map. So we're going to come down to the bottom, the little icon that's half black, half white circle. We're going to bring that up, and near the bottom of that pop-up menu, it's going to say gradient map. We're going to select that. All right, and it's going to give us our gradient map. Now I'm going to place the gradient map below our samples, because I want to be able to select these samples without any kind of effect on it. All right, and this is where it gets a little tricky. We have our gradient selector here. All right, we're going to click on it, and it brings up our editor. And what we're going to do is we're going to edit this bar here. All right, so we have our white point and we have our dark point. All right, so what we want to do is we want to match these 2 points with these 2 colors that we selected for our highlight and our shadow, and then we're going to create a third one for our mid-tone. Okay, so this bottom little square here, we're going to select that, we're going to click it, select it, and it loads the color right here. If we click on this color right here, brings up our spot picker color editor. All right. Now, if we hover over our highlight and click, okay, where is it? Oh, I know why. I am on my layer mask, all right? Can't have it on my layer mask, okay? All right, I don't know if you guys saw that, all right? I had my layer mask selected. You actually have to have the gradient selected. All right, so make sure. If for some reason you can't pick a color, check that. All right, so we're going to come here, click that. Oh, come on. Click our highlight, click once. Click on our sample that we took, and it's going to load it into your color picker. So here's our color that we selected. And we're going to, while it's here, we're going to look at the brightness. All right, we're going to look at this number right here where it says B for brightness. The number is 88. We're going to take that number and we're going to put it into the location. And we're going to put in 88. So that matches this position with that color. All right, hopefully you guys are following. Matches this position with that color. I'm going to go to my dark, and I'm going to repeat the same process. I'm going to select my color, brings up my color picker. All right, from my color picker, I'm going to hover over my dark color, and I'm going to click on it. That's going to load that color into the gradient. I'm going to notate this number right here, which is 25 for my brightness. 25, okay. And where it says location, I'm going to plug that number in, 25. And it brings that shadow area to the 25th percent brightness. or darkness, okay? Now we're going to create a third one. So we're going to click here. It's going to create a third point. Don't worry about what this looks like. It's going to look like crap for now. All right, we're going to repeat the process. Color, our color picker. We select our mid-tone. Notate, it says 54. Hit OK. Put in 54 here. Hit OK. And now we have our color mapped out for her skin tone. Okay. Now, if you notice, our image looks terrible because what it's doing is it's applying the color gradient across the board to everything. What we want to do is we want to limit it to just her skin tone. All right, so this is where it gets a little bit more tricky. We need to create a mask. All right, so I'm going to turn this off for a second. I'm going to turn my swatches off. And there are a couple of ways of making a mask. You can, use your lasso tool. You can use your pen tool. You can go into your channels and you can see if a particular channel will give you a mask. All right, in this case, it's not. Oh, bring my channels. Bring my layers back. There we go. All right. My channels isn't going to do it. So what I'm going to use is select color range. All right. Now, some of you may have seen me use this tool before for making masks. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of automatically make a mask using our color range. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on her skin tone. All right. Let me bring the fuzziness down. I'm going to click on her skin tone. Okay. And I'm going to start bringing the fuzziness up. And you're going to notice that it's selecting more and more of her skin. All right. Now I clicked on the brightest part. And what I want to do is I want to start going into a little bit of the shadow. So I'm going to come over here to my eyedrop selector. I'm going to select the one with the plus. All right. And then I'm just going to click right on the edge. And you can see that my mask is now broadening. All right. Now it's also selecting some areas outside of the skin tone area. That's okay. It's going to happen. We can modify this later. What you have to pay attention is the area where you want to apply the gradient map to. And in this case, I want to do it to her skin tone. So I want to make sure that I at least have a good portion of her skin tone selected as white, because this is going to create our mask, our white. All this outside area I can deal with later. Okay, so once I have it, all right, I'm going to do a quick mask selection and hit OK. All right. I'm going to go to my mask, hit the delete key, all right, and it's going to apply my mask, all right. Now you can see all these marching ants. I'm now going to get rid of my marching ants, Control D, all right. And we need to invert this mask because right now it's selecting everything but the face. All right, so we're going to invert it, Control I. Okay. And we need to edit our mask. So with the Shift key, oh, no, with the Alt key, Alter option, we select our mask, and now with a brush at 100%, 0 for 100%, right up here. Okay, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. All right. Oh, let me invert that. Using black, I'm going to paint out everything but her face and her hand. All right. Everything but her face and her hand. So I'm going to get rid of the sword. I'm going to get rid of the hair. I'm going to get rid of the ruffle of her cuff. All right. And it doesn't have to be overly precise here. Okay. If you need to, you can zoom in, change the size of your brush as needed, get rid of all this hair stuff, get rid of the glasses that are extending beyond, get rid of that little bit of hair. All right. That's looking good. Okay. Then I'm going to invert my brush selection. I want a white brush, and I'm going to clean up the skin area, any gray area in the skin. Okay, like here around the nose, I'm just going to get rid of that. The eyebrows, get rid of that. All right, now here it gets a little bit tricky. All right, the white of her eyes, I don't want this gradient affecting the white of her eyes. So I'm going to go back to a black brush. X switches me back. I'm going to make a small brush, and I'm going to paint in her eyeballs. All right, now the mask is going to look freaky, kind of demonic. All right, but I don't want that effect applied to the white of her eyes. Okay, I also don't want it to affect her lips. So I'm going to go ahead and paint her lips in black. Black hides, white reveals. All right, so I'm going to paint all that out. Switch back to my white. Clean the rest of it up. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. Little shadow where the glasses are. Little shadow on the forehead. All right. Okay. Zoom back out. There's my mask. Didn't take very long. Okay. And we're going to go back and to our color. All right. And you can see it's a little harsh. Okay, it's a little harsh. Actually, I need to come over here, and I need to click on my mask. I need to expand my mask a little bit, so I'm gonna just paint right in here. Okay. All right, it's looking a little harsh. All right, and that's because we don't have the appropriate blend mode. All right, we need to change this from normal, all right, to color, all right, because we're affecting the color. We want to get rid of that yellow cast and replace it with the colors that we designate, all right. So in this case, we're doing a blend of 3 different colors, from our highlight to our midtone to our shadow. All right, and everything else is getting replaced. Okay, so this is what it looks like after. This is what it looks like before. After, before. All right, now, I don't know if you guys can see it because it really is a very subtle difference. There's, in this area here, there's a lot of yellow. It's a yellow cast right in here. Let me do it like this. right in here is a lot of yellow. And then right in here, we have blue. Okay? Blue from the blood vessels will usually tint the thinner areas of skin around the eyes. All right, especially on people who have very pale skin, you'll see some of the underlying blood vessels will tint the skin, and because they're surface blood vessels, they're veins, the blood gives it a little bit of a blue tone because it's not that rich red arterial blood. All right, so we have a lot of blue happening right in here around her eyes. All right, in the bags of her eyes and the inside of her eyes. All right, and then we have a lot of this yellow that's probably being cast from all the greenery around it. So once we apply our gradient, all that goes away. It's no longer blue, and we got rid of the yellow cast and replaced it with our mid-tone colors. Okay? And that is pretty much what I did for this particular image, this particular portrait. Okay? So let me select, oh, here we go. Let me, skin color. Okay. All right. And what was this? This was highlights. Highlights. Okay. And this was my dodge and burn. Dodge and burn. All right. Again, try to make your labels that way you're not guessing. All right. I'm going to select the first, the last. Control G to group everything. And then this is after, this is before. After, before. All right. Big difference, huh, guys? Okay. Any questions? I'm sure you guys got a ton of questions. Let's have them. No questions?
Doug, thanks. I got to cut out. Thank you, but I appreciate the course. It's good. Yeah.
All right, Brian. Always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us. See you next week, hopefully. Cool. My Patreon people, did you get my my notification for next week? Okay, cool. So I'm opening it up to Patreon members first. We'll do a little test run. If you're interested in having one of your images critiqued, maybe you're having an issue with something, you come across a stumbling block, either artistically or technically, within either Photoshop or Lightroom. Maybe it's a composition issue, maybe it's a color toning issue, maybe it's, some other editing issue, whatever the issue is that you're having with a particular image, and you just can't quite seem to wrap your head around, and you want me to give it a crack at it, go ahead and submit it. We're going to do 2 images next week before we go into our Q&A. And then we'll see how it goes. If you guys like the concept, then maybe we'll make it a more regular feature. Maybe at the beginning of each week's session, we tackle a member's image, whoever, is brave enough to submit something. So feel free to contact me. I do request that you send me a raw file with your edits. All right, so don't just give me the raw file and say, here, I don't know what to do with it. I haven't done anything with it. I want you guys to at least make some attempt at editing the image, because as you're editing, you're going to, do things that, maybe you're guessing, maybe this is good. I'm not sure. All right. I've taken it to the level I'm comfortable. I think it can probably go more, or maybe I went too far. Let's get a second opinion. All right. And that's what these critiques are going to be. This is going to be a second opinion based on my experience. And hopefully you guys will learn something through that process as well. So I'm looking for brave souls to submit one image for next week. And I'll take the first two that come through my email or through the Facebook Messenger. Okay, guys? Any other questions about anything we covered today? I know it was a big chunk to take a bite into, so.
I don't have a question, but a comment, and why I didn't have any questions, but why I really enjoyed this.
Okay.
You started to go some topics that we covered several weeks ago,
yep,
or probably even months ago in detail. At the time, I was thinking, well, these are really neat, but how can I use them?
Yes.
And now, you say, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this, and that it made me think, now I got to go back and watch them. But it gave me a good jumping spot to see how to handle these kinds of things. So that's what I thought was very nice.
Yeah, yeah. And actually, you bring up a very good point. Actually, let me switch here. You bring up a pretty good point, because I know when I was learning Photoshop, and I still do it because I'm still learning right along with you guys. As I learn, I'll learn a little bit. I'll learn a technique. I'll learn a special effect. I'll learn one little nugget, and it becomes a tool in my toolbox. And usually when I first learn it, it's like I really have no clue where this fits into the big scheme of things. All right. Once you start acquiring these tools and your workflow starts progressing and your understanding of your workflow starts progressing, then you can start making those connections and saying, this needs a little bit of dimension. What in my toolbox can give me dimension? Dodging and burning. All right. If I burn a little bit of the profile to give it the illusion of shape, that makes my image that much better. Or it enhances it. All right. But that is built on earlier lessons about composition, about how the eye sees an image, where we go to the bright areas first. All right. So the bright areas advance, dark areas recede. Once we have that concept in mind, all right, then we can say, okay, well, I can control some of it with light. I can control some of it with exposure. And then I can control a lot of that with editing. All right, whether it's creating that contrast in Lightroom by, increasing my contrast, or dropping the shadows, or dropping the highlights, whatever it takes. Those are all tools to accomplish that task. All right, so the dodging and the burning is just one additional tool that you learn where to place as your workflow expands. Okay. I didn't start off doing a lot of dodging and burning in my images, just because I didn't have the full grasp of it, which is really weird because as an illustrator, I fully understood it. But as a photographer, for some reason, it just didn't click. I don't know how to describe it. It just, in my brain, the two were not crossing paths. All right? They were like in opposite directions. But fundamentally, whether it's photography or illustration, they were both the exact same thing. And I totally missed it. Go figure. It wasn't until that switch flipped for me and I had that aha moment and I go, oh, geez, I've been using this technique with my drawing, like forever. All right, let me apply it to a photograph. And then all of a sudden, boom, a whole new bag of tricks opened up. Okay, so hopefully, when you see a demonstration like this, hopefully it makes those bags of tricks, kind of fit together for you guys. So, all right, any other questions? No? All right, so if you are interested in submitting an image, get a hold of me, let me know. And then I do ask that you have a file for me for next Monday. Okay? Awesome. All right, thank you guys for being here with me this evening.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I'm having trouble here. Hold on a second. What's going on?
We hear you, Doug. We hear you, Bill.
Okay. I have trouble with this sometimes. Duck, I keep forgetting your address. Can you give it to me again, please?
Sure. It's duck@unitusphotography.com. So it's my name, my website, Unitas, UNITAS, photography.com. Okay?
And this time I will put in my contacts. By the way, if I seem a little spastic these days to anybody, I'm moving at the end of the month, so.
I hate moving. I
every time I go to pack things, I go, do I really want this? Like, how often do I look at this particular book? And as far as reference material, everything's online now.
Yeah.
And certain books that I have that are about TV or history of TV, it's like, I've been through this so many times. I've taken more things that I'm not using. I took a crock pot the other day because I used it only once. And for cooking, I have glass things for baking, and I have metal things for baking. I don't like the metal for baking. So I'm finally getting rid of those. I spent $54 for the metal, and so I'm
Hey, you can always have a tag sale.
The glass and I hate clutter. I live in an apartment building type of complex.
Yeah.
So it's a little hard to have a tag sale here.
Oh, okay.
And I just don't like strangers coming to my house, especially with COVID.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And so I'm just looking around, and it's like, but next week when we have the session next week, I have finally figured out how to do a DE. You're the one who taught me DOing out and buying expensive things to manipulate light or to do other things. You do DIY types. I'm going to show you my setup for doing product photography, for doing still life photography.
Yeah, cool.
Good.
Cool. Absolutely. All right.
And it's junk that I found someplace. I found 2 pieces of junk disposed, and one is a rack that I can put a rack for a background, and then a big table. And I went to Walmart and I got white fabric material and I got black fabric material.
Right.
It's almost like the time you did a class about 10 years ago, and it was red, and it was in your basement, and you had black background, and it was a red piece of something or other. That was
yeah. My ball of yarn.
Yes.
On the white plate with a black background.
Ball of yarn, and invented that. And 5 years ago, I entered it in a competition at North Haven Camera Club, and I won first prize on that.
Oh, that's right. I remember you telling me.
Yes.
Yeah. I thought it was a pretty unique composition. So, awesome. Cool. So if you're looking to submit something, definitely. One of the easiest ways to submit it is if you have it in Lightroom. Make your edits in Lightroom and then export it as DNG. All right, so it's the digital negative file. All right, and then you can email me that file. Or if you do it in Photoshop, just do the PSD file, PSD. If the PSD is too large to send through the email, and if you have a Dropbox, just put it into your Dropbox and send me the link. I'll download it from your Dropbox.
And your Dropbox address is duck@unitedphotography.com, right?
To put it, you'd have to put it into your own Dropbox and then share it.
Okay.
And you share it with your email, with my email.
All right.
Yeah. So, and if you don't have Dropbox, you can use your Google Drive.
Yeah, I like Google Drive better than.
Okay, you can do that.
They
both do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So, just make sure that you have the permissions so that I can download. So, okay.
Okay. Oh yeah. Good.
Awesome, everybody. Thank you once again for coming out and spending some time with me. Hopefully you all learned something, and we will see you all next week.
Okay. Have a good one.
All right. Be safe.
You too.
Wear a mask.
You too.
Yes. Okay.
All right.
Bye.
Ciao, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.